With this lesson, we're going to learn the letters of the Hebrew alphabet. The first letter of the Hebrew alphabet is an aleph. This is the letter as it's written in Hebrew, and this is how we transliterate the letter into English. The reason that we transliterate the letter into English this way is because it represents a sound that we don't really have when we speak English. So the aleph is a consonant. It's not a vowel. It's produced by a stoppage of breath, sort of like the silent H in honest or air. You hear that little catch of the breath before you pronounce the word honest. That's the sound that an aleph. The second letter of the Hebrew alphabet is a bet, which sounds like the English B. You'll notice that the first two letters in the Hebrew alphabet are aleph, bet, which is where we derive our English word alphabet. To recognize a bet, there's a couple of key things to notice. First of all, in the top right, there's a continuous curved stroke. And on the bottom right, there is this overlap between the horizontal on the bottom and the vertical. This is called a tittle, and paying attention to where there are curvatures and where there are tittles is going to become important for us in recognizing the difference between certain letters. You'll see more about that in the next video, which is on differentiating similar letters. This is a bet. Now, some Hebrew letters can be pronounced in multiple ways. The bet is one of those. If the letter has a stopper in it, what is called a dagesh, then this is the stopped form of the letter. What this means is that you stop the air when you pronounce it. So you say b, b with a stop. A spiranted form of the letter lacks the dagesh, or lacks the stopper. So when you pronounce the word, you let the air continue to flow. So instead of be, you get ve, ve. So the stopped form is bet, the spiranted form is vet. The way that we represent a vet, a spiranted form, is simply like this without the dagesh, and we pronounce it like an English word, letter V. The next letter of the Hebrew alphabet is a gimel. It sounds like the hard G sound in English. Gimel. The next letter of the Hebrew alphabet is a dalet, which sounds like the English letter D. Dalet. The key to recognizing a dalet is here in the upper right-hand corner. You have an overlap between the horizontal and the vertical, what we call a tittle, a key differentiating characteristic of the dalet. The next letter of the Hebrew alphabet is the hey. Sounds like English H. Hey. The key feature of a hey is this space between the horizontal and the left-hand vertical. The next letter is a vav. It looks kind of like a little fishhook. Vav. The next letter is a zayin, pronounced like the English Z, zayin. Here you notice in the upper right-hand corner there is a tittle, which helps you differentiate it from the vav, which we just saw. The next letter is a chet. The chet is said a little bit in the back of the throat, like you're clearing your throat. Chet. The key to recognizing a chet is this connection point between the horizontal and the left vertical. Looks kind of like a Greek letter pi. The next letter is a tet, pronounced like the English T. Tet. The top of the tet looks kind of like a box, which has had the lid pushed into it, or something like that. It's a fairly distinctive looking letter, tet. The next letter is a yod. It's just a little, almost looks like an apostrophe. It sounds like the English letter Y, yod. The next letter is a kaf. sounds like the English letter K, cough. You'll notice that on both the top and the bottom, you have a round stroke between the horizontal and the vertical. No tittles in this letter. The kaf is another letter that has stopped and spiranted forms. So when you see the dogish or the stop, you pronounce it with a stop of air. So k, cough. When the letter lacks the dogish or lacks the stop, the airflow continues, so it becomes the spiranted form, chaf, cough, chaf. This letter also has final form. The initial or medial form of the letter looks like this, which we've just seen with the curvature. This is the usual form of cough, used when it's in any position other than the last letter of the word. That is, in the initial or any medial position, but not in the final position. In the final position of a word, the cough looks like this. This is the final form of cough. It's used only when it is the last letter of the word. You'll notice that basically what has happened with this cough is that the bottom horizontal stroke has dropped and become a long tail, which hangs down below the line of writing. The other thing that's happened, which is a little more subtle, is this curved connection between the horizontal and the vertical in the top right has taken on the overlapped tittle form. The next letter of the Hebrew alphabet is a lamed, pronounced like English L, lamed. The next letter is a mem, pronounced like English M, mem. The differentiating characteristic of this letter is this little tail that sticks off to the upper left. The mem also has a final form, so the initial or medial form you've just seen, the final form looks like this. You'll notice that the tail has changed its form a little bit, so now this letter looks kind of like a box with a lid closed on the top. Notice that it has square corners in the final form. So this is the initial or medial and final form of the mem. Next letter is the nun, pronounced like an English N, nun. The nun also has a final form, so it looks different when it's at the end of a word than when it's in the beginning or in the middle. As with other letters we've seen, the way the final form takes shape is this bottom horizontal drops and becomes a long tail that hangs below the letter. So it still looks like a nun, but its tail has dropped below the line. The next letter in the alphabet is the samech. It's pronounced like in English S, samech. You'll notice that here at the upper left, the samech looks a lot like the final form of a mem. It's a box with a closed top. The thing to pay attention to with the samech is the lower right and the lower left are curved rather than square. Samech. The next letter in the Hebrew alphabet is ayin. This is the way we write an ayin in English. Like the aleph, this is an unpronounced guttural in Hebrew. For our purposes, the ayin is pronounced just like the aleph, so it sounds like the glottal stop in a word like honest. In ancient Hebrew pronunciation and in modern Arabic pronunciation, the ayin has a distinct sound from the aleph, but for the purposes of biblical Hebrew, we can pronounce them the same. This letter is a pei. It sounds like the English letter P, pei. As you may have guessed, the pei has stopped and spiranted forms as well. When it has the dagesh, the stopped form of the letter, sounds like pe, pe, pei, pei. The spiranted form of the letter, without the dagesh, without the stopped air, sounds like f, fe, So pay, fei. Pei also has a distinctive final form. As in the case of the other final forms that we've seen, basically what pei does is it takes the horizontal stroke on the bottom and extends it downward into a long tail that descends below the level of the writing. So final form of pei, also the final form of fei, looks like the letter but with a long tail. Next letter in the Hebrew alphabet is the tzadeh. It's pronounced like English TS. In English, we don't normally put the TS sound in first position in a letter, so it may be a little bit difficult for you to pronounce, but you can get there. It is pronounced tzadeh, tzadeh. The tzadeh also has a distinctive final form. Once again, it takes the horizontal at the bottom from the standard form of the letter and extends it into a tail that extends below the line. It also kind of plays around with the strokes at the top of the letter, but you can recognize it for what it is. Final form of the tzadeh. Next letter in the Hebrew alphabet is a kof. To me, this looks like a backwards Q, and so it's easy enough to remember. Kof. People sometimes want to pronounce this as a Q-U, like queen, and we almost always see a U followed by following a Q in English, but a kof really just sounds like a K. Kof. Next letter is a resh. Sounds like the English letter R. Distinctive characteristic here is the curvature between the horizontal and the vertical stroke. Resh. The next letter of the Hebrew alphabet is a shin, pronounced like English sh. The distinctive characteristic of the shin is this dot, which is to the right of the letter. Remembering that Hebrew reads from right to left, this is sort of in the back of the letter. The next letter in the Hebrew alphabet looks exactly the same, except the dot is in the forward position. This is a sin, pronounced like the English S. Sin. Final letter of the Hebrew alphabet is the tav, pronounced like the English letter T. Tav. The distinctive characteristic of the tav is this little foot at the bottom which points out to the left. The tav. If we look at the Hebrew alphabet from beginning to end, it looks like this. Aleph, bet, is the stopped form. The spirited form is vet. Gimel, dalet, hey, vav, zayin, chet, tet, yod. Kaf is the stopped form. Chaf is the spirited form. Lamed, mem, nun, samek, ayin, pei, stopped, fei, spirited, tzadeh, kof, resh, shin, sin, tav. All right, that's it. Congratulations and nice job with the Hebrew alphabet.